I'd like to take a couple of minutes now to talk about something that matters a lot to me because I'm a big fan of the sport of football, the game of football, and obviously my work is football related. The future of the sport of football. I mean, football's at a crossroads, and if you don't think so, if you think I'm being overdramatic, you have not been paying attention. All of the coaches and players this week's Super Bowl are being asked about the safety of the game, the future of the game. A couple of days ago, Ravens safety Bernard Pollard came out and said he thinks there will be a death on the football field eventually, and in 30 years, he does not think there will be an NFL anymore. A couple of days ago, Barack Obama, President of the United States, came out and said he might not let his son play football. Obama said fans are going to have to accept that the game will change to reduce violence. It might make football, quote, a bit less exciting, but it'll be better for the players. Obama went on to say, and I quote, "And those of us who are fans maybe won't have to examine our consciences quite as much." Excuse me while I vomit at the notion that a man who daily is sending thousands of young Americans to their possible deaths in borderline unnecessary wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, not to mention the thousands of possibly innocent Iraqi and Afghan civilians who have died under Obama's watch, this guy is saying that football fans might have to examine their consciences. That is absolutely laughable. Now, let's clear this up. Football is a dangerous game. It's a dangerous, violent game. You may get hurt. As a matter of fact, you probably will get hurt playing football. People have been paralyzed, and Bernard Pollard's right. Someday, somebody might die playing football. Now, in that way, it's not that different than other sports. Auto racing, for example, where deaths are a semi-regularity. Boxing is a violent sport where concussions are common, where people have died. MMA, an extremely violent sport. So there are other play-at-your-own-risk type sports. And really, football was never viewed this way as far as it might be coming to an end until about a year and a half ago. August 2011 is when all this started. That is when the first lawsuit was filed. It was filed by the family of Ray Easterling, a former Atlanta Falcons safety who committed suicide. They filed a lawsuit against the NFL alleging that Easterling was not properly informed of the potential dangers of football and the effect it could have on his life after football. Now, since then, over 4,000 former players have joined in on this. Let's call it what it is. It's a money grab. It's exactly what it is. These guys have made millions of dollars playing football, and now that their career's over and the money is slowed down, they see another way to get in and grab some more money, and so that's exactly what they're doing. Now, what it might do is it might literally kill the sport, because without violence, without the collisions, football's not football. If football turns into touch football or flag football, it's not interesting. I mean, don't forget, just because guys are out there throwing around a pigskin, that doesn't mean people are going to watch. Nobody cares about the Canadian Football League, for example. The NFL is the biggest sport in America today. But let's not forget how fluid that is. 70, 80 years ago, the three biggest sports in America were boxing, horse racing, and baseball. Today, 2 out of those 3, horse racing and boxing, are basically totally irrelevant, and baseball is miles behind the NFL in terms of popularity, and it's behind the NBA in most parts of the country. Now, in the northeastern United States, baseball is still the most popular sport, but that's the only section of the country you can say that about. My point is, even though the NFL has the market cornered now and it's the most popular sport in this country, that doesn't mean it's going to stay that way in 20, 30 years. And if they take away the excitement, violence is ingrained in the sport. I mean, violence has been part of human history in some form. It's been part of human existence as long as there has been human existence. As a matter of fact, today we live in a more sanitized society than maybe any time before in human history. These men who risk their safety every Sunday to play a game for our entertainment are well paid for that. Paid millions and millions of dollars. None of these guys are forced to play football. If any of these guys wanted, they could not play, get a regular job like the rest of us, and guess what? There'll be somebody right there ready to step in and take their place. I'd be among them. If the Jacksonville Jaguars, the local team here, called and said they needed a 5'10", 175-pound slot receiver and they were going to pay me $1 million, as fast as you can blink an eye, I would strap on a helmet and be right there. Even knowing the risks, knowing the concussion risk, knowing the risk a guy of my size would take against some of those big, fearsome Ray Lewis types. Players know the risks. Players understand. They know what they're getting into. And the NFL, the thing that worries me here is the NFL is just constantly backpedaling on this issue. They have not yet stood firm and said, hey, yes, it's dangerous. Yes, there's violence. Yes, you might get hurt. Yes, it might affect you beyond football. So knowing that, do you still want to play? Do you still want to play? Maybe it's going to take the NFL having guys sign a waiver before they begin their career saying death is a possibility. Sign here if you still want to play. And I guarantee you, plenty of people would still sign. Plenty of people would still think, hey, getting paid $1 million for playing the sport of football 16 Sundays a year, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Fact of the matter is, though, the NFL is not showing any signs of doing that. They're backpedaling every year, changing more rules to benefit player safety, or they allege changing more rules for the benefit of player safety when they're talking out of both sides of their mouth on this, really, because they're also trying to add more games. They've talked about creating an 18-game season, which obviously would be 2 more opportunities for players to get hurt. Now, as I said, players and coaches over these last couple days have been asked about it. Just today at Media Day, Jim Harbaugh, coach of the San Francisco 49ers, defended football. Said, of course, he'd let his son play football. He joked that hopefully, by Barack Obama saying this, many families will not let their sons play football, and therefore little Jack Harbaugh, Jim's son, will have a better chance of success. Now, Harbaugh was a little tongue-in-cheek in that, but I'm glad to hear somebody defending the sport of football because the players in this Super Bowl, they haven't really done that. Bernard Pollard, as I said there might not be an NFL in 30 years. Just today, Ravens safety Ed Reed backed up Obama's comments about how the game should be sanitized and player safety should be more of a concern. I got news for you. Player safety, it should be way down there on the list of concerns. It's not a safe sport. It's not safe. That's like saying in the sport of boxing, boxer safety should be a primary concern. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. The point of the sport, the point of boxing is abusing your other, defeating your other opponent, hopefully knocking your other opponent unconscious, out. I mean, this is what boxers attempt to do. And we've seen the long-term effects of boxing on people's health. Look at somebody like Muhammad Ali. There's no doubt about it. I'm not arguing that playing NFL football couldn't have adverse effect on your long-term health. It most definitely could. That's why those guys are paid so well. Keep in mind, 16 games NFL players play. Baseball players play 162 games, basketball players 82 games. The reason NFL players are paid so well is because they put their health on the line. It's because they risk everything on every Sunday. Nobody's denying that. And these guys are well paid for it, and yet 4,000 of them, as soon as their career have ended, in some cases, some of these cases, the guys have only been retired a year or two. In other cases, the guys have been retired for several years. But they're all jumping on this bandwagon, trying to get money from the NFL. Now, all these lawsuits have been rolled into one. It's going to be heard in a federal court in Philadelphia. Folks, if the NFL if they're found guilty or if they're found liable, if they have to pay these guys, say $500, $600, $700 million, who knows how much it'll be, the NFL is going to be able to absorb that hit. But how about lower levels of football? Believe me, if those players are paid, you'll have former college football players suing the NCAA for the same thing. Then you'll have former high school players suing the state athletic associations for the injuries they suffered playing high school football. Where does it stop? I'll tell you where it stops. It stops with an end to the game of football. And folks, this worries me. And I decided to do this video sort of spur of the moment after hearing what some of the players were saying this media day today about the sport of football, about the future of the sport of football. I'm not hearing anybody, with the exception of Jim Harbaugh, defend football. Let me tell you what, I have a son. Would I let my son play football knowing the risks? Absolutely. And I love my son more than anything in the world. What people have to remember, and what I think a lot of people forget, I heard somebody earlier today saying, well, I'm not letting my son, Listen, as parents, is our primary job to protect our children? No, that's not our primary job. Our primary job as it relates to sons is building men, building the type of man that you'd want. And the sport of football teaches you some very important lessons, as I learned when I was younger. Teaches you lessons like toughness, courage, teamwork, togetherness. I mean, there are things that can be learned from football, and there are some things, specifically the toughness and courage, there are some things that cannot really be learned by playing basketball or soccer, at least not learned on the same level. I believe the sport of football is important. I believe what football teaches the men who play it are important. And I love the sport of football, and I hope it continues for decades. And I'm very concerned based on what I've heard over the last couple of days. Barack Obama, the man who arguably responsible for the death of thousands of American, Iraqi, and Afghan soldiers and civilians, in the case of Afghans, Iraqis, over the last few years, coming out and saying that football fans might not have to examine their consciences. Please, it's almost too much for me. So, in conclusion, let me tell you, football fans, enjoy this Super Bowl, because who knows how many more we're going to get.